interest on your deposit.
You rarely get that back.
Finding places from outside of Canada, making sure that you don't get scammed. I have heard some horror stories.
I know my rights. You can't take advantage of them. There are good landlords out there.
Hello and welcome to Our Immigration Stories as told by Canadian immigrants. I'm your host, Christina McPherson, and each week we're going to dive into the real, the raw, and the inspiring journeys of immigrants who have made Canada their home.
Thank you so much for joining us, Anne-Marie, and thank you for everybody who's on here. We are going to just jump into our next session here. Is all about real estate and relocation because, of course, you're coming from the outside country and not everybody has family here like Audra to come or me. I came and lived with my aunt. So one, finding places from outside of Canada, making sure that you don't get scammed. I have heard some horror stories about people putting money down and they come here and the place is a rat nest.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk about relocating, you specialize in relocating and just how to help with that transition and figuring out that. So without further ado, Anne-Marie, Anne-Marie, specialize in relocating, or you help people to relocate, and you, of course, are a real estate agent within Toronto. What are the key things for people outside of Canada? What do they need to think about when relocating to Canada or thinking about relocating?
First of all, thank you for having me on this. I really appreciate it. And I hope I could shed some light on the audience and further help them streamline their Canadian immigration process on the real estate side. I think even though I wouldn't wait until you get here to start the process. I've dealt with clients from France, Mexico, Portugal, Brazil, Malaysia, the UK, and we've all started the process while they were in their respective countries because the real estate market is not as cut and dry as we would hope. There's a lot of different facets and caveats that you need to prepare yourself for. And it's great that if you have family like you and Audra did to come and at least, stay somewhere while you can figure out your budget, what type of where you want to live, what part of the city you need to be in, how long are you willing to travel to get to work, to school, knowing the Canadian winters. So these are all things that you could start to prepare in your respective country. If you're coming here to study, 100% you'll know where your school is located. So you could start mapping out bus routes and you could say, okay, I want to be in this part of the city. And then what I suggest is you also start researching that part of the city. If you're a single female coming here, you want to make sure that the area you're deciding to live in is absolutely safe. You don't want to feel unsafe living in an area. You want to go and read stories. You could go on news websites and see if, what has occurred in that area. So that's the first step. And I know on the real estate side, just so people are aware, real estate fees are paid by the landlord. So I get a lot of people asking how much I charge. And for you as a renter and a buyer, my fees are covered by the other party. So that is also a relief to that client because people think they have to come up with all this money to pay a real estate agent when in fact they don't.
So there's no consultation fee or anything like that.
Nothing like that. Nothing like that. And when you hear the horror stories, we are also aware of those horror stories. So it's always a good idea to seek a professional because aside from the horror stories, we also know the landlord-tenant board laws in order to protect you as a tenant too when you come here. For example, if you come and you want, you don't want to settle for a basement, you want to have a nicer property that, you want to reside in, you need to be aware that if that property was built after 2018 and you rent it for 1 year at this price, that landlord could arbitrarily say to you, hey, Christina, okay, so this property is not rent controlled. I'm going to raise your rent by $300, $400, $500, $600. So it's these small little things that you need to be aware of when you're coming. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is actually what my experience actually. I rented a place, rental agreement said we follow the landlord and tenant board rules. So I'm like, okay, once it says that, it must be true. Gotta be true. So then the following year, when the rent went up, it only went up by a small amount. So I never really questioned it. But then a couple of years after, there was this big jump. And I was like, how did you come up with this number? And then she was just like, that's just what places are going for now. So that's what I want to charge. So then I called the landlord and tenant board, which they weren't very happy about. And I was like, what are my rights? Right. And it's like, it's good to know this ahead of time. And then when I look back now, so this is like 3 years into it, I look back at the first year, the percentage of increase was way more than it was allowed. But because it was a small amount of money, I didn't question it, because in the agreement, it said that they follow the rules. I could believe that. So it's good to know your rights, and somebody like you or a real estate agent will help people to understand and know their rights and not be abused, because it's easy to be abused. So what's the best approach? So the user, an agent outside of Canada, how does, like, well, we know that we've got in touch with you, but what's the best approach and resources that they should use when looking for a place and coming here?
It depends. So it depends on, if you look for a property in the real estate field, you would go on to realtor.ca.
Okay.
You would punch in your criteria, and your criteria being 1 bed, 1 bath. You want a 1+ den, and then you set your budget.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your budget, you'll see what's available in the real estate world. I've had clients use Facebook Marketplace.
Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I've had clients use viewit.ca.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a new one, and I'll have to look it up and let you know. But these are the places. View It, no, you won't be taken advantage of, because you're going through a third party rental process. So they make sure everything is in line with what is being advertised. Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, very questionable.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So I would definitely consult a professional like myself to get the ball rolling. As realtors, if we cannot help you in our world, we will definitely advise you of safe and secure places that you can look for a property. And the other benefit of starting your search early from your respective country is, say I'm here and you plan on coming in May of next year. I have resources, colleagues, other clients that could reach out to me and say, hey, Anne-Marie, I have a basement. We just finished renovating my basement, and we want to put it up for rent in May of next year. And I could say, well, Mr. Landlord, I have the perfect client for you. I have someone that I've been working with over the past few months. She's not physically here, but I've gotten to know her. This is what her intention for coming here is. And I think she would be the perfect fit, because in our business, relationship building is key to be able to present you to the landlord.
Right. And you touched on a good point there about budget, knowing your budget, understanding your budget. So now I have an understanding of what the real estate market is like in terms of, as a renter, what is the market like for renters in Toronto for somebody's coming here? And the reason I laugh too,
I really do not like this question, but I do have to answer it. And I will be very honest with you. It's the going rate for a studio can go anywhere from $2,100 up to $2,400. A studio that is just an open space with a kitchen and a bathroom, ensuite laundry, maybe 500 square feet. I'm just going to go through the different types of property, and based on the current market, what they're renting for. Basements, you could get a decent renovated basement apartment for anywhere from $2,000 to $23,000.
Nothing in the 1,000 range anymore? Nothing?
No. You could probably rent a parking spot for $1,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just listed 2 properties yesterday. They're 1+ dens, just over 700 square feet. Decent building, really maintained, well maintained. We listed for, one is $2,850 and one is $2,800. And also factor in that most, not all, but most of these rents do not include your utilities.
Or
Mhm.
parking.
Parking is included if it's a condo, even if it's a private rental, like a basement or the main floor of a house. Parking is typically included. The only reason why parking would be charged is if the parking is not included in the maintenance and the owner was assigned a parking spot in a particular building at a certain amount. Then that onus would be on the tenant to incur that cost.
Yeah. Like, and especially in buildings where it's just rental and they're not
Right.
individually owned units. And the reason I bring it up, of course, is like back in when I just came to 10 years ago, my rent was $600, right? Of course, it climbed the moment I moved from there. But are you speaking specific to maybe GTA, right?
No, I wish I was, but it's kind of merged across the board because of the really high immigration coming to Canada and the competition of the international students. A lot of people are being asked, although it's not allowed, and let's make that very clear, but due to the nature of the competitiveness, some tenants are willing to pay 6 months to a year upfront in rent just to secure a place.
So nothing in the thousands anymore. Nothing.
Nothing in the thousands.
1,999. No.
Someone touched on it in the earlier panel about being, I think it was Michael. You're coming here for a purpose. You also said, be clear on what your end goal is. Think about it. What am I willing to sacrifice to get to the next level in my journey? Maybe you might have to come and share a 3-bedroom condo with 3 other people.
Right.
That could be more affordable. But as Audra said, you don't know who you're renting with, how their personalities are. But think about it. When you go to university, you're in a dorm with a stranger that you've never met, sharing a room, going to school.
Right.
So oftentimes I do see a lot of those properties being advertised in the real estate market and field. So it's just, what are you here for? Where do you want to get to? And more times I see people make the mistake of having their living expenses dictate the majority of their budget. And then they have no room to save for anything.
Yeah. And it's easy with $2,000 rent.
$2,000. So easy.
Yeah. So you spoke about landlord and tenant board a little bit earlier. If you could go a little bit more into that to help people understand like how to know what their rights are and how to protect their rights as a renter and how to exercise their rights using that landlord and tenant board.
I wanted to mention, aside from going to the landlord tenant board, there is a ton of Facebook groups that you can join that are specifically geared to help facilitate certain questions by either landlords or tenants to the right area. On these pages are lawyers, paralegals, realtors, landlords, property owners. So you get a wealth of information. I belong to one myself, and I'll share that with you a little later. So you could put it in, the summary of your summit. But I think the best way to explain it is giving examples. I was just reading a story about a tenant that in her lease, it says that she can do laundry on the weekends and she could do laundry during the week sometimes, as long as it's after 8. Very cut and dry, right? So she said she sometimes during the week, she would do laundry at 8. She started to get a text from the landlord saying, we can hear you do laundry. Please don't do it. But then she said, it's in my lease that I could do it after 8. So it's knowing that contractual agreements hold up at the landlord tenant board. Never have conversations over the phone. Always ask for a test and always ask for something in writing, because what's happening is the landlord tenant board is backed up maybe 12 to 18 months of landlords trying to evict tenants because the mortgage rates have gone up. So they want to get you out so they can start charging market rent. And even if your landlord comes to you, for example, and says, oh, Christina, I'm selling my property, you have to move out. No, you do not have to move out. The rule states that you, Christina, as a tenant, needs to be marketed with the property. And you are marketed with the property by when it goes on MLS saying there's a current tenant. You can disclose what you're paying, but you have to say that the tenant is willing to stay. If the buyer wants to be the end user, meaning the buyer wants to move into the property, then the buyer has to file an N12 with the LTB to evict you.
Okay. So like landlord and tenant board, they have their website and stuff.
Yes, they do. They have their website. There is a ton of information. You can literally Google any question that is happening to you as a renter, or even just typing in rules for rentals. I actually have a form. So basically, I have roles and responsibility of landlords and tenants. I will share that with you as well, but you can find everything that you need to know on the LTB or the LTB website.
Okay, I'm going to bring up a specific case study if you want to have any comments on it. So I know two boys, they're sons of my mom's friends. They came to Canada. They were looking for a place to stay. They found a place to stay. They paid their first and last rent. Some money is involved. When they got to the place, it was the furthest thing from what was described or what was on the pictures. It was basically community living. So you're in a house with a bunch of other people sharing a room, and just the upkeep of the place was like just below standard, below standard. So much so that when they got there the night, they're like, we don't want to stay here. And these are boys. Not saying anything about boys, but
yes, they have a little more tolerance to certain living conditions. I understand. Yeah.
Yes, diplomatically. This.
Yes.
Right. So now they reach out to me, and guys, this is the power of networking. Reached out to me. I reached out to somebody that I knew who was renting a space, and they were able to go there that very night. But then money has been exchanged, and they've also signed the contract. They had a hard time dealing with the landlord and getting back the money, because I mean, you kind of sign it, but how would somebody fairly deal with a situation like that?
And that's a small claims court matter.
Not even landlord and tenant board.
No, the landlord tenant board basically deals with evictions and notices that tenants are given by landlords and vice versa. For example, an N5. And if you're served an N5, it's because the landlord is claiming that you have damaged the property. And you have a certain period of time to fix those said damages, if that is the case. And then the LTB only facilitates grievances between landlords and tenants for the main purpose is eviction. So anything to do monetarily, getting back a key deposit, for example, you would have to go to small claims court. Yeah, perfect example. My mom's friend rented a place from this lady and it didn't go fare so well. So she decided to move out. And the lady charged her $500 for a key deposit. And you can only, by law, charge $200, but she paid it. And then I had a feeling, my gut told me that she wasn't going to give her the key deposit back. So I stepped in as a professional, went to the property, had her sign a form stating that I had the keys. I returned the keys to her and got the tenant her key deposit back. So other forms that you could download to help you be familiarized with, you know, the ins and outs of renting is something called an RTA. And it's a residential tenancy agreement.
Okay.
And it will list all of the main criteria. And the other one is roles and responsibilities.
Yes.
For landlords and tenants. And these two forms will give you the appropriate information as to what they can and cannot ask for.
And one thing that I did not know about until after, and when I brought it to my previous landlady, I don't like dealing with unreasonable people. So I will leave my money just to not have to deal with you. Right. So interest on your deposit.
You rarely get that back. It is a thing. And it is Yes, 100% you are entitled to it. But the challenge that our current rental market is facing is there's such an influx of renters that they'll just delay, not give it back. And like you said, are you really going to go to small claims court for $50?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody who is wondering what that is, it's just that when you go into a place to rent, you pay the first and last month's rent. And then the last month will cover your last month, but then there's interest that is incurred
Accrued through the whole year because
throughout
you
the
don't,
whole.
you don't necessarily make use of that deposit till you're ready to move out. So technically, you could be living in a place for 5, 6, 10 years, and that's 10 years of interest
Mm-hmm.
on that set amount. Now, I don't want to paint a picture that all landlords are horrible,
Mm-hmm.
because there are good people out there and there are good landlords out there.
Mm-hmm.
So always know what your rights are, and it's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You also empower yourself when stepping in that role of a tenant to dictate right from jump to the landlord that, listen, I know my rights. You can't take advantage of me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I like about, my current situation is that I'm dealing with property management. I'm not necessarily dealing with a landlord or an individual, which I prefer the property management. But of course, like you said, there are good landlords. My previous landlord was amazing, and my currently having to deal with property management, where it's kind of more professional or standardized or regulated. So it's easier to deal with.
Yeah, that being said, there is certain property management companies that will advertise rentals as well.
Okay, yes.
So that is also another professional entity that knows the rules and responsibilities of the landlord. I know Dell is a property management company, and they also have a website, Dell Rentals, and they will list all of their rentals that are available. Now, this is strictly for condo because Dell falls under Tridel, and Tridel is a builder of condos.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's another option for people coming here as well, is to contact a property management company and reach out to them and see if they have any rentals
available. Yes. Another one is Medallion, and I know that they're continuously building, and they are a GC, a general contractor and developer as well, but they have the property management line and are putting up a lot of rental buildings all over. So that is that. So let us say now part of their Canadian dream is home ownership, which is nice and salty right now in terms of the cost of homes. If their dream is to own a home, like, what's that process like if they want to pursue home ownership, and what incentives are there for newcomers to Canada for like first-time home buyers?
There is there's one specifically government related, where the government will give you a portion of your down payment. Like, say you're shy a certain amount of your down payment. And wait, you know what? Let me back up. In order to buy, you need to be a permanent resident. You cannot buy without being a permanent resident to Canada. So that's your first step.
Yeah.
Then the next step is to consult a mortgage professional and to see exactly what you're approved for. It's nice to go to the RBC website and, the Realtor website and punch in some numbers and, get a pre-approval for X amount. But until you submit the hard documents, you will not know exactly what you're approved for.
Okay.
And knowing your down payment. So this flows into what I started to divulge, that the government will help you with a down payment if you're a first-time home buyer. I don't like going that route, because when you go to sell, you then have to pay that money back to the government. And
Plus
I'm
the
not
equity.
Kind of, and I'm not 100% sure on, like we talked about, interest, what other added taxes. And again, it's just knowing what your end goal is. Obviously, when you buy a property, it's not your forever home. It's a property that you're going to use to get into the real estate market that you can leverage to buy further properties. If you're single or you're with your husband, obviously you want to start a family. And then that could dictate a bigger house. And maybe you can't afford that bigger house at this very moment. So then maybe you consider buying a house that has an income property that can help offset your costs, right? But definitely going to a mortgage professional and having detailed conversations with them. Depending on the price point of the property, you could still buy a property with 5, 10, and 20% down. 20% down comes into play if the property is over $1 million.
Of course.
And then you have to think of your land transfer tax. In Toronto, I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware, but in Toronto, you pay double land transfer tax. And outside of the GTA, it's just one land transfer tax. Your closing cost, you have to estimate typically 1% of the purchase price for your closing costs. So, and these are monies that you have to pay upon closing. And if you do not have the funds to close the property, that comes with its own slew of issues. You could be sued by the sellers. You will lose your initial deposit. And that's why it's just always have the right professionals on your side. Have a really good real estate lawyer, a knowledgeable realtor of the market, the area, what makes sense for you at that time, and a good mortgage broker that's going to give you, I steer people away from just going to the bank because the bank is very one-sided and in their own little boxed world. A mortgage broker has multiple lenders that deal with multiple situations and can guide you on the best viable option at that point in time based on your current situation. For example, I had 2 guys from Palestine. They moved here 2016. They had nothing. They came and they were looking for, well, they had jobs. They were working for TELUS at that time. And they came in 2016 and they were getting, the cold shoulder by everybody. Nobody wanted to deal with them. It was winter. They needed a place. And I said, fine, I'll help you guys. You know what? The relationship that we built over the years, he bought 2 properties with me.
Yeah.
He kept renting because that's what made sense for him. His rent was so cheap that the properties that he bought, he was able to rent it out and have a portion of that go toward his current expenses. He's building equity because over time, equity is a really good way of pulling money for your next investment or your next property. And I'm actually meeting him tomorrow for dinner. Him and his wife just had a baby. And he came here with nothing and started out renting.
Yeah. Perfect.
So there is always hope. I always believe that there's always hope and you can always achieve what your goal and what you set out to. You just need to maybe think out of the box and maybe the ideal situation is not what you thought it could be, but it's a step.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's something that's recently started, but I've heard of like communities or groups that come together and they kind of buy a house together.
Yes, they do that. Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
If you have a really good lawyer and you have, I always say that money changes people. And when money becomes involved in certain situations, it can, either make or break a relationship.
Yeah.
So that is a good way. And again, I will provide you with this information because my neighbors are landlords and they put me on to this gentleman that will teach you and help you do that very thing with people that are investors themselves. So you all have one common goal. And it's specifically facilitated by a very extensive legal process. So like I said, a good real estate lawyer and knowing what that involves as an entity. And also too, I wanted to touch on the first time home buyer. you are entitled to a rebate from the government of some monies back. So you do get money back as a first-time home buyer.
Money on the price of the home? Money on...
I believe it's a certain percentage of the price of the home. For
Okay.
example, my client, she just bought a condo for 607 and she's getting 4,000 and change back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
like a nice tax return. Kind of. Okay.
Kind of. It's like it's a first-time home buyer rebate.
Rebate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Tax
Okay.
rebate.
Ah, cool. Perfect. I think we covered what there is to cover regarding the real estate market. I'm coming here. Do you foresee house prices going, like, fixing itself soon?
I would hope so.
Historically, it always just goes up, right? I guess so.
Well, let's look at it logically. You're at a certain interest rate, so the price obviously is going to go down because people can't afford a higher price point at a higher interest rate. So then the Bank of Canada just announced that they're not raising the interest rates. And then when it becomes lower and lower, you're approved for more on your mortgage. So what happens when you're approved for more? You overbid unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So it will definitely go back up. I don't know when, but there is, I think India specifically is the highest immigration population coming to Canada within the next
25%.
The next few years. So historically, certain cultures, they come with money per se. They have money at home that when the time is right, that they can pull out and definitely use it to their advantage when they arrive in Canada. But also don't just focus on the area that you're living in. If you want to get into the real estate market, there are so many other provinces in Canada where real estate is really affordable. In Calgary, you can get a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, over 1,000 square foot condo for $1,600. So, I mean, those are other things you need to consider as well. I mean, everybody always wants to come to Toronto and focus on Toronto, but there's other beautiful provinces and cities. Montreal is beautiful. If you have a little bit of a French background, it's an asset. But for the most part, people do speak English and the housing affordability is much better there.
Yeah. The immigration thing is also a little bit different there too. So it's like, think of everything together.
Right. Yeah. Everything together. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. You were going to say Nova Scotia. Sorry.
Yeah, Nova Scotia is another good place as well. And like I said, you just need to know, why are you coming here? What's your end goal?
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing with us. If you had any word of advice, I think you're second generation Canadian, first generation.
Yes, my parents came here when I was only 3 years old.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you're more Canadian.
My brothers and sisters were born here, and we're from Jamaica. We're Jamaican as well.
Background. Okay. So any word of advice to our people on here? Some of them are in Canada, but they're still going through the immigration process. Some of them are not yet in Canada. They're looking to come here. Any word of advice from an immigrant perspective, having immigrant parents and all of that? What would you, like a one-liner that you'd say to them?
Research.
Repeat.
Research. Join a Facebook group. Their Facebook groups are the best ways to get involved with that particular country. I mean, you could join a Facebook group. I'm sure they have one, Newcomers Coming to Canada. You will see experiences from other newcomers like yourselves. I mean, a community is important. And whilst you don't have a community, you can establish a community through these groups. And you're going to hear different stories, different occurrences, people that learned from certain lessons that are willing to offer their advice. And, it helps you have some sort of familiarity with what you're stepping into. And you're not coming in, just blindly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That is my advice.
Yes, thank you. And you would be probably the fifth person that has said that today, right? So guys, if it's something's not hitting home, let that hit home. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. You can send me the resources that you want me to share, and I'll send them out in the final day email. And yeah, thank you so much. We are gonna take up.
Sorry, please, anybody that is, you have coming here, please share my contact with
Absolutely.
them. If they, they don't need to be my clients. Information is free, I always say, and knowledge is power. So the more you know, the more you'll feel confident coming into a situation, not willy-nilly taking the word of that person without doing your research and knowing what's right and what's not. Because I can tell you, there are a lot of newcomers coming here and being taken advantage of.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And guys, this is the power of networking again. I've met Anne-Marie through somebody who I met at a networking event who's here with us today. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.